From the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me from the US, Bryan, who is the CEO of GreenPal. Bryan, thank you very much for being on the show today. Can you please introduce yourself and what you are up to?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. So, my name is Bryan Clayton. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called GreenPal. GreenPal in the United States is an app that works like Uber or Diddy or Gojek, but for lawn mowing services. So, if you are a homeowner in the United States and need to get a gardener, rather than calling all over the internet, you can just download GreenPal, pop your address in the app, and somebody comes and takes care of the chore for you. GreenPal is a 10-year overnight success. My two co-founders and I have been at this project for a little over 10 years. And now we are nationwide in the United States with around 300,000 people using the app to get lawn mowing services done.
That's very cool, Bryan. Like, actually, what caught my eyes, whenever I like to have someone on the show, so there's something that I see interesting. And for you, it was like you deciding to venture into tech space coming from a landscaping background. Can you like a little bit tell us about, how the idea of GreenPal came?
Sure, yeah. So, uh, my first business was a landscaping business, a traditional lawn mowing and landscaping business. So I started a small grass cutting service in my neighborhood when I was 15 years old, and little by little grew that into a flourishing business. Eventually, over a 15-year period of time, getting it to 150 employees and $10 million a year in revenue. And after I sold the company in 2013, I started exploring what I was going to do with my life next. And quite frankly, I got bored and I thought, well, I think it would be cool to start a tech startup. I think that would be interesting and I think I can do it. And it was kind of like I was naive. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. I didn't know the challenges that awaited me. But I recruited two co-founders and we started working on the first version of the app and what we thought it should look like, and we released it into the marketplace, and we learned a hard lesson. If you build it, they will not come. And we didn't let that like discourage us. We just kept working little by little and began solving the problems that I had observed 15 years in the business of running a landscaping company through technology. And it took about 3 or 4 years to build something that people actually wanted to use, that actually solved their problems. But we just made little incremental progress along the way and didn't give up.
Yeah, that's great, Bryan. Like it's you actually answered the second questions, but like, what other significant challenges you face as an entrepreneur while building GreenPal, and like how did you overcome them? Like you mentioned few, but is there anything else like you can highlight?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. So the first thing was navigating from a what I call a blue collar entrepreneur to a technical entrepreneur. So I was running a landscaping business with over 100 employees, 90 trucks, going out every day servicing customers. It was a very much a hands-on business. It was hand-to-hand combat, so to speak. And that's a tough business to run, but there's a big difference between running that kind of business versus a technology business where now you're managing engineers, developers, product designers, copywriters, things like that. So they're really two different worlds, so to speak. And so I didn't know the differences between those two worlds until I started making the transition from a blue collar business to a tech business. So that was one challenge. The second challenge was there's a big difference if you're running a traditional style of business, maybe a restaurant, a construction company, a dry cleaning service, a home cleaning service, whatever, versus starting a tech company. Most of the time, when you're starting a tech business, you're inventing a brand new product from scratch that does not exist in the world. And that is
Mm-hmm.
very different than running a traditional style business that's solving a need in the marketplace. Those two are almost completely different paths, because one, in a traditional business, you're just rolling up your sleeves, you're getting to work, you're figuring out how to service customers better than your competition. Maybe you're developing a strategy to do that. But on the second path of inventing a new product, there is no roadmap. It's just you going from one, trial and error, going from one failure to the next without like a loss of enthusiasm, and just forging your way through the unknown. And I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know what that was going to look like. Nobody told me that those go that what that looked like. So that was another challenge that I had to deal with.
Yeah, that's informative. But do you think like there are some qualities that we should have in order to be ready to such challenges, or do you think it's something for anyone that can learn?
I think anybody can get through it so long as you are sufficiently motivated to do it. I think one if like one thing that could be helpful is are you an animal for this type of business? Like what I
Mhm.
mean, and I don't mean like like do you have a long neck and you look like a giraffe? I mean like would somebody describe you as an animal? Like man, that guy or that gal's crazy to get that business going. Like they're just insane. They're working 7 days a week on it. They're calling customers back. They're figuring out problems. They're solving them. They're an animal. Like if somebody would describe you as an animal, then this is the right path for you, because that's what it's going to take. It really is a never ending series of challenges that you're going from one problem to the next, trying to solve these problems. So that's one thing, and anybody can become that. The next thing is, I think if you can look at the whole endeavor as one big experiment, because a lot of times when we're in business, we're putting things in and we expect things out, and so we're doing all of this work and we can like quantify maybe what it will become. Well, in a startup in with a new product, it really is an experiment, and the goal for everything you're doing is just information. So Paul Graham, he has a saying where he says action produces information. And so really that's all you're after. You're trying to get information back from users as to what's working, what's not working, what you wish, what you should be focusing on and what doesn't matter. And really if you can look at it that way, it can kind of reduce your expectations in terms of when things are working and when things aren't. And so that's another thing, another tip I would give, especially in the early days, is action produces information. You're just trying to experiment with what's going to work and what's not.
That's really very informative, Brian. Now, anyone who thinks about starting their own business or their own company, um, they struggle usually in finding, and you touched base kind of on it, but they little bit struggle to finding a user base. So for you, in the initial days of GreenPal, how did you go about building a user base and spreading the word about your platform?
It's the hardest part of it. It really is, and it doesn't get talked about enough, I think. So there's a saying that first time founders worry about product and second time founders worry about distribution.
Hmm.
And I think what they mean by that is that the first time founder, which I was, even though I had built and sold a company when I started GreenPal, I was very much a first-time founder all over again because I was starting a tech product and inventing a new product. So really, I was a first-time founder. So as a first-time founder, you obsess over the product and you worry about the product. What does the product look like? Does the product solve the problems that I think my customers need it to do? And what does the design of it look like? And so on and so on and so on. You obsess over that. As a second-time founder, you understand that all of those things, while they matter, are really kind of like table stakes and don't and it isn't really the hard part. That the hard part is distribution. And the second time founder won't start a startup if they can kind of have some sort of intuition around the distribution and how they're going to innovate in the distribution, because they know that the harder part is actually getting people to use the product that you just built.
Yeah.
And anybody can build a product, and as crazy as it sounds, like, you know pulling something like this off and building a technical product that works is hard. But the harder part is getting people to find out about it, to use it, to keep using it, and that really that the product itself is the easy part. You see this a lot with like musicians.
Right.
uh, I don't know how to play the guitar. I don't know how to play the piano. I don't know. Like, it's a lifelong endeavor to learn how to play a musical instrument or how to be a good singer, and that is really hard. But it's 100 times harder to get 1,000 people to show up at a live concert that you put on. And so while the world is filled with talented musicians, it's filled with even fewer uh, uh, traveling live musicians that could get people to come to a live show, and yet even fewer than that reach massive amounts of fame and success. So starting a new product, starting a startup, is much like one of a musician in that sense. And so for me, I didn't anticipate all those things. I was confronted by them, uh, and I had to realize that I just had to start really really small and just get and work at one level at a time. And so, okay, I need 10 customers. How am I going to get 10 customers? And so I would ask friends and family to use this app that we had just built. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
now I need 100 customers. Okay, well, how am I going to get 100 customers? Well, all I can do is just pass out flyers. Like, I'm gonna get some flyers made up and pass them out around the neighborhood, and so that's how I got 100 customers. And then so now I need 1,000 customers. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, let's talk to the 100 customers and
Yeah.
ask them how they normally find somebody to get their lawn mowed. And one thing we kept coming across was a lot of times after uh, getting recommendations from friends and family and so on, that they would just go to Google out of desperation. And so we would keep hearing that, and we thought, well, it's really hard to compete in Google search, but maybe that's where we focus all of our attention, and that's what we did. We focused the entire company on how to compete in Google organic rankings, and that took 2 or 3 years to get traction on. But we just kept focusing on keywords we could compete for, small towns where they weren't super competitive, and got a little bit of traction there, and slowly have built the whole company on Google organic search as a means of getting customers. And I think as a new startup, you're going to be good at one channel. You're going to be good at one means. You're
Right.
probably not going to be good at two or three or four at one time.
Yeah, that's really resonates with what we know usually about startups, and how it's you need to do multiple things at the same time. Now, this is to lead me to the second question regarding this part of building the business. So we know that when we start something new, our resources are like very scarce, right? So we don't have the luxury of having all what maybe big companies they have. So how do you prioritize your resources and focus, especially when you are starting up? So what did you do when you were in the early stages of GreenPal?
Yeah, I think having constrained resources is actually can be a benefit. It's like nothing clarifies your thinking more than being super hungry. And I think it's just a law of the universe, and it can work to your benefit that if you don't if you don't have a bunch of resources, then you don't waste time on the things that don't matter. Another saying, necessity is the mother of invention. and
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's certainly what was how it unfolded for us. We didn't raise any money to build this business, so the business had to survive day one, and that caused us to have a very focused, maniacal focus almost on our customers, because we needed them to use the product and we needed them to continue to use the product. So the first 100, maybe even first 1,000 customers was very much us checking in with them manually. Hey, Mrs. Smith, I noticed you tried GreenPal last week and you got one mowing done, but you didn't sign up for more. Why was that? And going through like the putting in the reps, so to speak, of trying to figure out where we were letting people down and where we were making them happy. So if we had raised $1 million or $500,000, we probably would have put a customer support rep on that, and then gone on to doing other things that maybe didn't matter as much as making sure our customers were happy. So that whole dynamic of not having a bunch of money, it forced us to do the right thing. And so I think if you're starting a startup, you have to look at it like almost like how a hospital emergency room looks at like patients. People that come into a hospital emergency room don't get treated in the order in which they came in. They get treated in terms of severity, and they triage around whose cases are most important. In a startup, you have to do much the same. You're just picking the first one, two, or three most important things that matter in your business at that week, and you're throwing all of your intensity on fixing them. And so it could be, where are the constraints? Well, we have 0 customers. All right, well, we got to start getting on the phone. We got to start passing out flyers. We got to go to a trade show. We got to beat the pavement to get 10 customers. Okay, so nothing else matters until then. And then maybe now you got 100 customers. It's like, okay, well, what's the big constraint now? Well, it's me and my 2 co-founders, and the big constraint now is we got 100 customers, but the product really sucks, and we're having to hand crank all these things that we don't have the technical solutions for. So our big constraint now is dev hours. We actually don't have enough development bandwidth to build these features that people want, they're asking for. Okay, well, we need to either upscale ourselves and learn how to code. Somebody on the team has to learn how to code, or maybe, man, and this is what we did. Maybe somebody needs to go drive for Uber and make $30 an hour, and then we can take that $30 an hour and put it towards a developer, and that's what we did. So it's like whatever stage of the game you're at, look at it like a hospital or emergency room. What are the 1, 2, maximum 3 things that are most important to the business at this stage of the game? And let's throw all of our intensity into those 1, 2, or 3 things.
Wow. But I'm sure, like now, Brian, from my discussion with you, I can see how passionate you are about your company. Because for someone, because maybe if someone who doesn't thought about having his own company or his own business or his own startup, and he thinks like it's easy, maybe now say, oh, this is a lot of pain. But I want to relate that when you have the passion, for what you want to build, what you believe, I think you can see this commitment that we are seeing from Brian. Now, you mentioned something about you decided to bootstrap. So why you decide to bootstrap rather than raising funds maybe from a angel investor or a VC? So why was the decision to bootstrap?
Yeah, for me, there was a couple things that happened at once. So the first thing, I really thought we would go out and raise a bunch of money and do the traditional Silicon Valley tech startup path, because that was sexy and it seemed glamorous. It seemed like a fun thing to do. But I kind of dipped my toes in that for about 3 months and didn't like anything about it. Because the first thing was, I had just built and sold a business for a pretty good sizable sum. And so now, me personally as an entrepreneur, I'm having to go on this path of schmoozing investors for 25 or $50,000 checks, when in my last business, that was a very small amount of money, and so I didn't like personally my ego. I didn't really want to do it, and I didn't really want to go down that path, and so there was resistance there. And the second thing was I thought, well, if we can just build a business that will make, $50,000 a month, then we'll raise a seed round every
Mm.
6 months, and we won't have to do all of this crap. Like we won't have to spend like a year, working on a pitch deck and going around and running a sales process on investors. And so it was just very much like a process that I didn't have the appetite to do, and that's why we didn't do it. And I didn't want to build a product and waste time working on things that investors loved. I just wanted to build something that 100 people would use and keep using. And I figured if we could solve for that, then the other problem would solve itself. And that's how it worked out. But it took a long time. It took 3 or 4 years of us working on ourselves, getting the skills we needed, working on the product, working on this business, and doing all those things at once. Whereas, if I went back in time today and how would I do it differently? I would probably go raise money because I know all the
Mm.
things. I know all the things. I know, like, I could do. It took us 10 years to get to where we're at today. I could probably do it, in 2 or 3 if I had to do it over again. So it was like at the time, the right thing to do for me was not raise money because I needed to evolve as a founder. I needed to grow up. And if I had raised $1 million, I probably would have wasted it all. But now, that I'm a second time founder, that I would probably go raise capital. So I think my advice is if you're a first time technology founder, maybe hit a single or a double to use American baseball as analogy, like try to get on base and maybe sell a small business. Then on the second or third one, maybe go the raising capital route because you don't have to. And I think a lot of times outside capital destroys more businesses than it helps create.
Yeah, and this is something that I always discuss with people who thinks about having their tech startups, and they always say, "Yeah, we need to raise some seed funds. Maybe we will do even some multiple rounds, and then we will go IPO at the end." I say, "Okay, fine, but do you really need it? Like, what's your end goal with that?"
Right.
And I like to ask this question, and I'm happy that you answered already, Brian, because now some of my guests they say, look, like you can keep bootstrapping as long as you are happy with the size of your business, and maybe you would need to go and raise funds if you want to take it. I mean, to scale it up, and you cannot do it with the current uh, I would say setup, or maybe the amount of money that is generating for you today. And this is where you go and for having, or sometimes you would go and raise funds if you are building an idea which really requires a lot of money to put in even before you have the product. And I think this is where sometimes also we see a lot of failures because they don't do enough product market fit and all the market research that they want to do. And this will lead me to ask you, like, how do you think, like an entrepreneur really, if they decide, let's say, to go in the route of raising funds, maybe to an angel investor, venture capital, whatever. So what do you think they should at least understand before going and approaching an investor?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I would encourage anybody that is thinking about raising funds to first try to take it as far as you can, meaning your business, before you go to raise funds. And what I'm like, a lot of people, a lot of new founders will say, "Well, I will start this business if I can get capital. If I can get capital, then I'll start the business." And really, it should be the other way around. It should be I started the business, and I've gotten it to this point of maybe a prototype or some you've de-risked it in some way. You've validated the idea, and you've got 50 or 100 people that want the product, and you've hustled that up. Then go raise capital. And so that would be the only way I would recommend doing it. I wouldn't recommend saying, okay, I've got this idea and maybe I've, thought about, and then you go try to raise money to bring the idea to life. That's really not the way it works. And especially in today's environment where capital markets are constraining. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, for me personally, I would never consider raising money until I've gotten the business to a point where it's kind of like I have a rocket and the only thing I'm missing is rocket fuel. And like I'm sitting there, I can get in the rocket and like, but I can't go anywhere because I don't have rocket fuel. And the capital is the rocket fuel. And maybe that's a bad example. Maybe what usually is the case is people have a Toyota Camry and they want to put rocket fuel in the Toyota Camry, and it's just going to blow apart. And so that's what usually happens. So I would look at it as, okay, I've got all of this customer demand. I've built this thing. It's working at a small scale, and I know that if I add the rocket fuel, then I'll be able to take off and go even faster. And I wouldn't go raise money unless unless you look at it this way. Like, if you wouldn't take a loan on your parents or your mother's home to start the business, and if you fail, your mother loses her home. Like, if you're not that certain about it, then, like, if you don't have that kind of conviction, then
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend like going and trying to raise money, because investors are going to sense that. And you got to have that level of conviction before you do this. And then the other thing I would say is, it's kind of hard to, once you go down the path of raising a seed round of funding, you set off this chain reaction of events that's really hard to stop, and it's really hard to reverse course. And what I mean by that is, like, you raise the seed fund, a seed round, and that sets you off on a path to where now you have to raise a Series A, and you're kind of like racing towards the cliff. And if you can't prove out certain metrics, then you go off the cliff, or you raise the Series A, which extends the runway a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to reverse course on that. And investors, they have maybe 10, 20, 100 of these investments. You have one. This is your only company hopefully your only company you're working on at the time. And so it's the dynamics are not in your favor. And so just think about that. If you're fine with this kind of get rich or die trying binary outcome, then go for it. But if not, you need to think through that, because that's what you're signing up for.
Yeah, that's really very again informative, and I advise everyone to listen, because I agree with you, Brian, because I've seen, like, from I like to read a lot about startups, and follow their paths and see which one will succeed, which one will fail. And what you mentioned is exactly seems to be the right, I would say, approach to do it usually. Now, like, shifting gears a little bit, I'm a little bit like, I would say, curious to know about how you had this self-taught journey into software development. Like, what resources did you find most helpful?
Yeah, I think for me, my back was against the wall, so I think that can help. Like, I had no choice. I had to learn just enough to be dangerous to get our product built, and my co-founder did also. And so the first thing we did when we launched the first version of GreenPal, we paid a development shop to build it. And we spent like $150,000 for a development shop to build what we thought the app should be. And then we kind of tried to get some people to use it, launched it, and it was a total failure. And it didn't have the features it needed. It was hard to use. It was just it missed the mark on what we were trying to do. And we came to the realization that if we were going to be in the tech business, we were going to have to learn enough coding and enough development to be able to rebuild the whole thing from scratch, and begin to do the million things, the million iterations that needed to be done, that we would never be able to get to where we needed to go by constantly calling these guys and doing change orders and things like that. We would go broke
Yeah.
doing that. And the way I look back at it, like trying to start the tech company without learning how to code was kind of like saying, going back to the music metaphor, would be like saying, I have this idea for a song uh now, and maybe I've written the lyrics, but now I just need a musician. And it's like it's not the way it works. Like the musician, it has the song inside of them, and so that was a foolish thing, and it was a hard lesson. And my back, my team's back was against the wall, and we had to learn enough about how to code and how to rebuild the product to get to the next level. And so my co-founder spent his last $6,000 on a boot camp. Where we live in Nashville, Tennessee, in the United States. And so he went full time in this software school. It's called Nashville Software School. And for 6 weeks, no, it was 3 months, 6 months, and he learned enough to be dangerous. To set up our development environment, and at the time Ruby on Rails was really popular, and so that's the language that they taught,
Wow.
and so that's what we rebuilt everything on. So he started rebuilding it, and he's like, man, there's so much to do. I can't do it all myself. You're gonna have to code up. Talking to me, he's like, you're gonna have to like learn how to code up these views, and you're gonna have to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and enough Rails to be able to tie them together. And so that's what I did. And I took every online course I could, like watched every Envato Tuts tutorial on YouTube, became the world's worst front end engineer. To work alongside him to meet him where he was working on the back end, and I would take it from there and like make a usable front end interface to help him rebuild the whole thing. And that's what we did. And we did that for a long time, for like 2 years. Me and him working back and forth, front end and back end. And then as time we started getting like 100 customers, 500 customers, 1,000 customers, started making a little bit of money. And then we were able to build a dev team around us. He knew what we needed in terms of back end devs. I knew what we needed in terms of front end devs. And we were able to build a team based on our experience and our knowledge and what we knew we needed, because we were kind of doing it ourselves, but not really good. But at least we knew what good looked like. And so that's how we did it. And it was hard, but it was the right thing to do.
Wow, this is really inspiring, by the way. And I'm trying to now think about what I would do if I'm built something and my dev team leaves me. So, what are my options?
It's
Right?
tough.
Yeah, it's really tough because you have to go, as you said, like you need to be like, as they say, start from scratch, learn. Of course, like I think we are a little bit lucky in this time because you can find a lot of courses, a lot of resources,
That's
but
right.
still, yeah, but still it's very challenging. And personally, like of course, like always, I tried to be at some stage in building apps and all this, but I like to give as they say, everyone his own work that he should be supposed to do. But yeah, like it's really tough, and congratulations on really getting to here, passing this. I know, like also, Brian, you focused a bit on data analytics, and it had like some role in the growth of the business, right?
Yeah, you learn really quick when you're trying to invent a new product that you don't know anything. Like you don't know what users want. You don't know what decisions to make. And so a lot of times you're like going off of gut instinct, and a lot of times you're proven wrong. So it's very, very humbling. And so then you start, even if you're not a data oriented person, and I certainly wasn't, you start understanding that you have to collect data. And even if data is just qualitative data, talking to 10 customers, talking to 50 customers, and taking the qualitative data, because a lot of times we think data, we think spreadsheet, we think CSV, we think a massive fire hose of data that we're slicing and dicing, but really data in the early days needs to be, I did 10 usability tests at the coffee shop, and this is where the product is confusing to use, and I'm using that data, even if it's only ten data points, to improve the product. And so as a startup and as a founder, no matter what stage of the game you are in, you are always using data at different stages and different amounts to make better decisions. And so, even to this day, I still try to, even though we have 300,000 customers, I still try to blend the gut instinct from a qualitative data and qualitative research, what people are telling me, versus the quantitative data. What are the cohort analysis telling me? How are people behaving after we make changes and so on, and blending that uh, into a specific knowledge of okay, what is the right decision to make. So if you're not using data at all levels, and even going after a dozen or 50 data points in the early days, and you're just using your opinion, one or two things are going to happen. You're either going to fail or you're going to get lucky, and like getting lucky is not a strategy. So you really want to go after the data as much as you can.
Yeah, right. By the way, like this is something also I keep advising some people. They come to me, they have ideas, and this is, as Brian mentioned, data collection and analytics. You should do it at early stages, like even before you start building anything, because you need to build some data points to see like how people are excited about your idea first. Then you start to build, and then you start to collect their feedbacks. And the more data you have, the better decisions that you can have. So 100% I agree with Brian on this point. Now, Brian, as we are approaching, the end of our interview today, what some final advices you can give to aspiring entrepreneurs, someone who's maybe now graduating from college, someone who just decided to drop out and say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go and do all this by myself. So what you tell these young people who are maybe watching or listening to us today, that maybe have an idea, they are hesitant, and they want to start? What do you tell them?
Yeah, especially, if you're thinking about getting started and you haven't yet, you can look at your life. How many good years do we get? 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 good ones, you're going to do something. And if you look, I think to like live an interesting life, you have to have an interesting story of some kind. You have to do interesting things. And I think the business can be the answer to that. The business that you start and the journey of starting that business, or maybe multiple businesses, can be the thing that causes you to live an interesting life. And certainly has been for me. I've been an entrepreneur for 22 years. I'm not particularly talented at any one thing, and I've lived a so much more enriching, interesting life having started and built one company and started another, that I otherwise would have not lived. And so look at it that way. Look at your life in the context of a movie or a story, and look at like the highs and lows that are going to come with that make that story interesting. And the business can be the storyline to your life. So and that can help you get started, and it can help you get through a lot of the challenges.
Yeah, that's great. Now, as we come to the end, I have a very famous question, Brian. The question is, which question you wish that I have asked you, and how you would answer
Ooh.
it?
Well, you've asked some really good questions, so I appreciate that, and I also appreciate you having me on your show.
My pleasure.
I guess I guess one thing would be, um, that I've always wondered is, you know, did you ever think it wasn't going to work, and how do you know when
Mm,
it's working? And because a lot, like the first 3 years of starting GreenPal, I was just like, man, I don't know if this is. Maybe it was just the first 2 years. I think by the third year I knew, but the first year or two, it was very much like a leap of faith, and I didn't know if it was worth spending 10 years of my life on the project. So for me, I was looking for like that validation that it was working. And I think, guess it came at like the end of year one, maybe 18 months into I remember I was working on a Saturday, and my two co-founders were working with me. We worked 7 days a week, and I remember something like 30 people signed up that Saturday for our service, and for the first time, I didn't know who any of them were, and so that was the moment, that I knew that it was going to work. Now we have 1,000 or 2,000 people a day sign up, but at that moment, it was a Saturday, and 30 people signed up, and I didn't recognize any of the names. So that was like the tipping point from, just ground and pound, calling people, passing out flyers, pressing the flesh, to now a little bit of traction's happening. Word is getting out. We're getting recommendations, referrals, and people are signing up, and I don't know who they are. So that was that moment that I knew it was going to work.
That's really great, Brian. And I can feel this moment, like what you could have been feeling at that time. You and your co-founders, because like yes, we did it. Like some people coming and they want our service, which
That's
is
right.
like it's really a moment. Like maybe it doesn't relate 100%, but for example, same for me, because the podcast for me is kind of a startup, right? So
Absolutely.
I run it as a startup, and the first like couple of times where I start to see messages from people that I don't know messaging me saying, "Hey, like we listened and we like it." Oh, okay, that means I'm doing something right, so it's good, good sign.
It's a very rewarding, validating, fulfilling moment.
Exactly. And like a couple in my career also as well, although like it was not, I mean, like in the form of a proper startup, but kind of an entrepreneur kind of things when in the corporate world, and you do something, you show it to people, and even people you don't know in the company, they say, "Hey, we listen, we heard that you did it like in a different way that we used to do. Like, yeah, we want to try it." So really, these moments, guys, are moments that it will pay off all the pain. The reason I mentioned this because it will pay all the pain that you felt maybe down the road. It might take 1 year, 2 years, as Brian mentioned, like until you really start to get. So if you want to go this road, you need to be patient. You need to give it time, guys. It doesn't happen overnight usually. Brian, really, thank you very much for joining me today. What I will do is also like I will leave, the company website, GreenPal's website. If someone is in the US and they might be interested in your services, so they can get to know about the company and what we do. And as usual, this is something I repeat at the end of each episode. If you have any feedback or questions about this episode or the show in general, please reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn, Twitter. My email address is also like on the website of the podcast. You can reach out to me. If you are interested to be guest like Brian today, also we can arrange for this. Just send me a message. We can arrange for that. We can set up the logistics part. Don't worry about it. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And as usual, we will meet again in next episode. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.